Mr. Coach Klein. Coach Klein. Mr. Coach Klein. Coach Klein.
The imbalance of diaphragm and its effect on our skeletal structure. As above is so below, an unanchored breath will take its toll. This will be a continuation of the talk on where does our pain come from. So you can find that in the last videos. That was done live at my office in Shavertown. So this one, hopefully I won't ramble too much, which tends to happen when I'm not speaking in front of a crowd. But let's get through this as we go here. So we'll be talking about breathing here. It was mentioned in the last video, so definitely watch that. Talked a lot about this psoas muscle and how they're connected. Here we can actually see the physical connection on the left there. And then we can see also that there's a difference in size, right to left of the diaphragm. And this doesn't seem significant. I mean, it is significant. You can notice clearly that this is a big difference. The left diaphragm is much smaller. And since we have a connection to the major stabilizer of our low back, the psoas muscle, which attaches to the discs of your lumbar spine and the transverse processes, and it goes to our hips, and it's considered the major stabilizer of our low back, that yes, it's going to cause an issue. You can even see the twist if you look over here on the right. You can see this is the standard torsion I see, where these lumbars down here start pulling forward on the left side. And that's always connected with a tight, overused psoas muscle on that left side, pulling. Anything that pulls on the disc. Even when I started talking about this 7 years ago, I knew this muscle was important. I didn't understand all the connections. Like, it connects to the diaphragm, it connects to the discs. I don't know all the ins and outs, and I probably still don't. I know a lot more than I did, and I'm going to share that with you today. So the diaphragm is a powerful muscle whose major role is respiration. So here we can see how that works. And you can kind of feel it. So go ahead and breathe along. So when we inhale, it helps suck the air in, right? And then when we exhale, the diaphragm comes up. Now this doesn't do it justice, because we just saw there's two domed structures. This is showing just one. But there is a left and there is a right. Although it is connected, one can have trouble doming to help with exhalation. And that's what happens on the left side, is it stays flat, just in a constant state of inhalation, as we'll look at. Kind of an odd looking structure by itself. But these are the attachments. My mouse decides it wants to work. These are the attachments where the psoas joins. So this is bottom of your thoracic spine, lumbars are here. Diaphragm itself attaches to the rib cage as well. Even here on this rendition, it's smaller on the left side. And it's flat, it's lacking a dome structure. Just a random picture I pulled off the internet when I Google searched. So the left side tends to lose its dome shape that it should have during exhalation. Inhalation, it should flatten on both sides. So this means it is in a constant state of inhalation, which causes the intercostal muscles to be overworked, as well as the anterior scalenes and pectoralis minor. We'll show you where those are, but they're all on the front of your rib cage on the left side. So I see this on everyone that I work on. There's different patterns, but this is the starting layer of the onion, if you will. Layers get added on top of this problem, but this is always the base problem. So that rib cage is lifting on the left side. It's pulling up towards your neck, tightening those intercostals, those scalenes that attach from your neck, your pectoralis minor, which wraps to the shoulder, causes it to rotate in. Also on the left side, the psoas and the abdominals on the left, they struggle to hold the front of the rib cage down. And this results in the left pelvis shifting or rolling forward So that tends to lead when we're walking. Right when you're sitting, it just naturally pulls forward. And our body will compensate by throwing the right shoulder forward so you're not walking in circles. And honestly, you don't need to know all this stuff. It's just, there's a lot of imbalances and distortions, causes distortions in the skeletal structure. It starts with an imbalance in the muscles. It starts with this imbalance in the diaphragm. It just gets worse with every breath you take. Here's a picture of that. It looks like, hard to see, but this left side is to roll forward. So that's what that arrow is kind of showing. The whole pelvis is rolling together. There is some movement in the sacroiliac joints. I think the pelvis is just the pelvis, but there's movement. So there's this gapping I feel on most people on the left side, their SI joint in the back. And we can get that on the right. It's another layer. Eventually that right will start to roll forward to match the left. So that's severe instability. There was a presentation I did a while back before I even understood any of this called just forced closure versus formed closure of the sacroiliac joint, just based off what I saw on everyone. Talk about how that works in conjunction with your hips. Because yeah, the hip sockets will do the opposite. Because we talked about how, okay, the rib cage is, it's lifting on the left, it's twisting, the right shoulder is pulling forward to fight how the pelvis is pulling forward. The hips do the same thing. They rotate. The left will rotate externally, and the right will rotate internally to offset what the pelvis is doing, the spine is doing. This is pulling forward on the left. The psoas runs from here to here. This little nub right here, the lesser trochanter, attaching. So it's tight. It's in a taut position. It's very in a lengthened position because that has to go over this pubic bone here. And if that's pushed forward, it's just hard to work. So it's just constantly, always working. So when I release it, I feel the neck get better. When I just dig my out, people are like, "What are you doing? Why are you massaging my intestines?" I do this so I can adjust their neck half the time. Just having them breathe just a couple times, me digging into the diaphragm and the psoas, having you breathe with it, amazingly, it fixes the neck far better than any chiropractic adjustment, helps me get some movement. But the problem is just going to come back. It needs to be brought into a short position. It's just me doing a little trigger point therapy, helps it relax for a second for the first time, maybe in its life. And that just takes stress off the skeletal structure elsewhere. Again, this is probably way too much. I need to know this, you don't. I need to know all the ins and outs, but it helps to have a small picture of what's going on. Again, we can see a little bit of the difference here. It's not as dramatic, but we can see the QL is actually back here. So that's another stabilizer. But psoas here, joining up, we could see very clearly on the gross anatomy dissection that is connected. We can only kind of guess at it in the older pictures like this. It's like at least probably have some fascial connections. But recent gross dissection studies show that okay, there's actually direct muscular attachment, the diaphragm to the psoas. So in the last presentation, we talked about how you bend 4,000 times a day. And then I made note of that you breathe a lot. The average is like something from 17,000 breaths to could be over 30,000. That's a huge. It's like saying someone bends 4,000 times a day or 8,000 times a day. It's almost double. That's crazy. So it all depends on how often we're breathing. Are you stress breathing? Or short, shallow, quick breaths from your shoulders, or you're not really using your diaphragm much at all? I mean, the diaphragm's always involved. Yes, there's a lot of different accessory muscles. We talk a lot about this in foundation training. There are ones we want to get to work, the rib cage expanders, anything with serratus in the name, there's lots of those. Anything with serratus attaches to the ribs, so we know that it's working to help open up the back of the rib cage, open up wide the rib cage, because everyone opens up the front really easily. The diaphragm's all balled up. We don't stretch it laterally. We don't stretch it posteriorly. We need to open up that mid-back. It's very important, especially for lifting. So your left diaphragm, and really your whole left side of your body, gets progressively good at inhalation every time you breathe. 20,000 times a day, or more or less. And the right side is pretty good at both. It's a bigger muscle, so you just have like 10% more abdominals on your right side. Of course, that's going to cause a problem. Your core is significantly stronger on your right side. It's going to affect you. So this can go on causing imbalances that you are unaware of. You may not even face chronic pain from it, but it will affect you in some way. Neurologically, with disease, it's going to come at you in a different way. Just so we talk about pain is a blessing. If you have pain, and once you're aware of this, you feel this every time you walk, every time you sit, every time you breathe, you feel this imbalance. It's crazy. So that pain and that awareness is actually a good thing. The body just gets numb. It shuts off that response. It's going to stress your organs and stress you in other ways. So you'll face different diseases. So you'd rather have the back pain. It's annoying, but it's like, hey, yeah, you need to go take care of this. You need to work on this. I'd rather have that. And it was a leap for everyone talking about, like, where does disease come from? Like, oh, it's chronic. This is a source of chronic inflammation. I have some crazy, we're going to get into the Bible here in a second, some crazy thoughts, just because I'm sure you're wondering, like, why is it the body like this? How did this happen? This seems like a big issue. Pelvis and neck, we've been talking about this. The neck will distort to counter the torsion of the hips and the lumbopelvic region. So our right diaphragm is much larger than the left, the psoas connection to the diaphragm, and its role in anchoring. When we talk about anchoring, foundation strength, anchoring is pulling down on the diaphragm. That psoas is shortening, it's engaging, the hips are scrolling inwards. So when we do breathe, the diaphragm, the ribs aren't thrusting forward. So remember that this thrusting is happening a lot on the left. So psoas on the left becomes tight, put in quotations. It's tight, but it's in a constant state of eccentricity. It's working in eccentric contractions. And it's just, it's placed in a taut position, like a band that's overstretched. And it's trying to work and engage there with every breath, and it's failing. 24/7 because the major stabilizer the lumbopelvic region, like we're talking about. So this causes the other stabilizers, like your scalenes, left anterior scalenes, to also work. And we'll show you pictures of these two and how they look very similar. This is something I've just studying recently. Originally, this was all about the neck, and it just brought it back to the diaphragm for you. So in my mind, it's like we wonder where all these diseases come from. It's clear that this, if not all, I like to say, if nothing else gets you, this imbalance of the diaphragm will take you out. Even with my knowledge, it's going to take me out. I can only combat it a little bit. It's still going to win in the end against me. So you're not going to get your left diaphragm to be as big as the right, okay? All comes back to nervous system stress. That's what chiropractors have always preached. Take stress off the nervous system, trying to get the skeletal system aligned, muscles balanced, so the nerves aren't affected. Nerves are affected, the stress on the nervous system is going to hit you in different ways, but that's where a lot of diseases come from. So we're not just talking about chronic pain. So here, we'll get a little Bible on you. Even if you're an evolutionist, it's like, well, if the body's so smart, why did it evolve like this? Or was God just not paying attention? Why did he create the body like this? So a lot of people, I didn't know this. So Selah is the word. I'm probably saying that wrong. Not a Hebrew scholar. So if you're out there, come in. I did talk to one of my Jewish patients about this. He had some crazy thoughts. But Selah is the word used for rib. God took something from Adam's body to make Eve. So this is a very architectural term. It's never again used to describe a rib. To be fair, I looked, and there's no really ever talk about a rib in the Hebrew. There's no other word for rib. There's another word used when a lot of people, apparently the Hebrews knew exactly where to stab somebody. They called underneath the fifth. implying the rib, fifth rib. They're going for the heart. So there's a couple. Abner, I think Abner stabs a guy with a spear under the fifth rib, but yeah, it's a different word. This is the only time. So translators just like Selah must mean rib, so it could mean something else. And you probably know where I'm getting at, but let's just read this. Selah. A rib is curved, literally of the body, or figuratively, like a door. It's like, what I read is, like the Ark of the Covenant, the sides of the Ark of the Covenant could be a chamber, corner, a leaf. All these give us like a possible picture of the diaphragm. Remember, it's supposed to be curved. It's a curved dome structure. It's on your side. The root here, I thought was interesting, is to curve again, but also to limp, which is what we see is people just can't, they're always on the right foot because of this problem. So it causes this subtle limp, this imbalance. Pelvis rolls forward. I just thought that the primitive root there of Selah was even kind of this antalgic gait it's implying. So in English, the verse reads, "And the Lord built the rib that he had taken from the man to a woman. He brought her to the man." However, the Hebrew word Selah is a rare one in the Bible and often refers to a body, only refers to a body part here in the preceding verse. So the translation of rib is uncertain. So there you go. Something you didn't know about the Bible. Might not be rib. So my thoughts. Adam did not need to be perfect. Otherwise, what's the point of the tree of life? Why do you have a tree of life if you're already an angelic creature that can live forever, right? Adam was made different. Right? So, Selah, you're probably wondering, is that the same word? It sounds the same. We don't know. It's unknown. I always thought this was interesting. We see it a lot, over 70 occurrences in Habakkuk, the Psalms. Excuse me. They think it means to, a musical term, or it's to pause or take a breath and reflect. That's what they assume. So Psalm 3:4, 3-5 here. "But know that the Lord has set apart the faithful for himself, and the Lord hears when I call to him. When you are disturbed, do not sin. Ponder it on your beds. Be silent. Selah." I like that one because it kind of gives the idea you're breathing. Maybe if we should do this in our foundation training classes, just end with Selah instead of Namaste. It's like ponder, reflect on what you just learned. We talk about meditating on what our body's doing, how it's moving, how we're breathing. That's what we meditate on. Just like when you're studying the Bible, you meditate on the scriptures. You're not just clearing your mind. So possible connection, they both sound similar. This is from Jewish mysticism, but popular on Facebook. I always roll my eyes on it, but it is something interesting that Yahweh, every breath you take is you're saying the name Yahweh on the inhale. Yahweh. Interesting. That's all it is. Also, that the tree of life, or any tree itself, looks exactly like a lung, right? The pulmonary structures of the lung. Always like that idea. So that's what this picture is here. Is that, yes, this is our tree of life. So God created man with his breath. In a way, Adam created Eve. Whether it's part of the lung or he did take part of this diaphragm is what I'm getting at. And, people say well, was man, all other men have, they used to teach that other men, other humans had one less rib. It's not true. You have 12 on each side. Most people, I'm sure. Actually, I know there's people that have extra ribs. But in general, most people have 12 on each side. But what we do see with everyone is this. So we have to ask the question, if you believe in God or if you believe in evolution, like, why is it like this? What is going on? This will kill you in time. So we know that God at least implied that man's life would be short. But I think even in the garden, Adam was designed to die. He needed to be resurrected. It all pointed that. He didn't have a resurrected, glorified body. I don't think he ever did. It's a promise of the resurrection. It's a path they had to take. If they had stayed in the garden, of course, they'd access the tree of life. Maybe they could have continued to live for a long time. So there's their biblical thoughts for the day. Take it as you will. So the summary of that is, I think God took part of the diaphragm on purpose. And that's an inherited trait that every human has. Because he gave it to Eve, he made her flawed, if you will, designed to die. And there's probably other things designed in the human body to take us out eventually. It's important that we die, right? So we can be resurrected. No one can live forever. I mean, we will when we're resurrected, but maybe man will try to correct this, to surgically fix the diaphragm. Maybe that's something they'll design. I don't know. But that makes sense in my mind. It's an interesting thought, at least. And I think it makes far more sense than him taking a rib, taking part of the breathing structure. That's how God creates us, with his breath. And then he wanted Eve to be created out of Adam. How poetic to use part of the diaphragm or the lung, because even the lung is different left to right. Back to anatomy. So here, nobody's really standing like this, let's be honest. But good picture, I thought, of this rib flare. The rib are thrusting forward and her left side, so it makes sense. This is happening a lot on the left. It's opening up. So this transverse abdominis is lengthened, it's opened up. Then I'll feel this shortening of these muscles in the back. But no one's walking around like with their butt sticking out like this. It tends to be the opposite. We'll show pictures there. But there are a few people like this. I call them the cheerleaders. That was back when I used to do videos. I had this whole posture series. The cheerleader and the runway model. But we will see the pelvis tilt like this a little bit more on the left side as well. It just tends to be forward. Like I said, it rolls forward. So some people will really they'll drive the neck back. They'll pinch the shoulder blades a lot to try to fight the forward sway of the pelvis. This is normally what I see in different variations of this sway back posture. And there's just something wrong with the education system because people misunderstand sway back. They think sway is deep curve in the low back, and it's actually right here. It's flattening. Lumbar spine's flattening in the sway back posture. So I don't know who taught you that, but the more important thing is to think about the pelvis shifting forward. So we can see this black line is our center of gravity. The pelvis is shifted way forward to that. The trochanter of the hip should be, or really the pubic bone, should be close to this black line. So the head naturally will follow the hip, but a lot of people, like the last lady we showed, will drive the head back, but the hips will still be forward. We will see the pelvis come back later in life. That's where we get the old man postures. They spent so much time here in the sway back position, created arthritis in these a lot of joints, but definitely the low back joints, lower facet joints. And then they're forced to bring the pelvis behind them. They go from having their hip flexors in a very short position to rounding, driving their head forward to try to bring them in a short position. Then they realize how much hip mobility they really have. You see with the steps that they take that it's not good at all. But the truth is this is not good hip mobility. It makes you appear, with the pelvis tucking like this, being driven forward, makes you appear that you have good hip mobility. A lot of people think they have great hip mobility. It's just because they've really brought this distortion in the spine and pelvis to make it appear that they do, and then they further that the more they work out. So you're adding strength to this function, forcing areas to move that aren't designed to. Talked about the spine's major role being stabilizing, holding a lengthened position, locking, especially when we lift. All right, I don't think I need to read it, but yeah, let's read this last part. Compression and rigidity in the joints is the body's, it should be like a apostrophe there, body's self-defense mechanism to combat muscular imbalance. So the spine will stiffen, it'll compress, shorten to fight imbalances, left to right or front to back. And I'm always changing my mind on which ones to attack first. You know, chiropractor, we're trying to remove the left to right, trying to untwist you. Same thing with this diaphragm, it's a left to right issue, right? The left is different than the right. So it causes imbalances left to right. But a lot of people have these front to back issues. Both hamstrings, short and tight. Tucking the pelvis on both sides. It's just we're seeing also that we might want to address what's happening on the left more than the right as well. Usually I say with foundation training, it's not really attacking a left to right issue as much as it's attacking a front to back issue, and you'll get a lot of good correction with that. I have. Adding this on top of it, this awareness, has really brought it home for me, really helped put that chronic pain, put that final few nails in the coffin, if you will. Always getting better. And that starts with understanding what the problem is. You can't fix a problem if you don't understand it. You have no awareness of it. You just think it's just random stuff. So compression happens in this posture. And we see that obliques, ab muscles there, they're weak on the left. They can't hold the front of the rib cage down. A little blurry. You don't need to read it. So like I said, you don't need to understand these muscles. But we could follow the arrows. We see that there's this lift on this, well, just imagine on the left side, there's a lift. So here it's showing how inspiration works. And yes, it's happening on both sides, but it's really happening a lot on the left because on exhalation it should be driving down like this. We get the engagement of the abs. It's just not happening like it should. So there's all your little intercostals. We can see some of the scalenes here. First, going up there to the neck. Then we see the pull, the anchoring. Should have this pulling down of the diaphragm from the psoas. It wraps to the hip. That's also not happening as it should. So the question we have, is there a psoas of the neck? We've hinted at it here. There's the scalenes. As far as I know, there's no attachment to the discs from these muscles, but we can assume that there's probably at least some fascial connections. But the scalenes here, the anterior scalenes wrapping in, through extension of these muscles like the pectoralis minor, we can attaching to the shoulder, very similar, like the psoas runs from the lumbar spine to the shoulder. Got our intercostals here as well. And I'll notice like bending a patient's knees. People always ask me, why do you do that? So sometimes they'll try to get the neck to move and it doesn't. I haven't bent their knees and bam, easy. It's just showing this connection. Shortening that hip flexor, you're taking tension out of the hamstrings. There's a lot of reasons. Like you could feel the change in the curve of the neck when somebody bends their knees. Just like I said, we could feel the change in the curve of the neck when I massage the diaphragm. So I do both, but usually that left diaphragm. Getting that to relax really helps the neck. So stability is crucial in areas of high use stability. We talked a lot about in the last presentation. Lumbar, cervical regions, at least parts of them, tends to be the upper cervicals and lower lumbars that really have a lot of hypermobility, too much movement. They're forced to have this because you say bending for that. Sometimes, hey, we shouldn't really be bending. You should be hinging from the hips. The hips are so rigid and stiff that people tuck the butt, bend from the low back, and the SI joints. And then we force too much from the knees and the elbows. They're being forced to twist too much. Should be a little twisting happening when we're doing squats and things like that, but the knees and elbows, they're going too far, too much knees over toes. Can really wear the knees out if the hip is rigid itself. So yeah, we can train the knees to have great knees over toes, but if the hip is stiff and rigid, then yeah, the knees are just going to get burned out. That's why we see so many knee replacements. So underused areas become stiff and immobile. That's the hips, the shoulders, and just for the sake of this presentation, the mid-back as well. The rear of the rib cage, every breath. It's really, really important, actually. It's a big one. Not just for the case of this, it's just normally people talk about the hips and the shoulders. But yeah, the mid-back needs to be able to round and open up every breath, but also needs to round and open up when we do things like deadlifts, which is a bend. This is the 4,000 bends you're doing a day. That's why we teach deadlifts. This is a picture I love. I wish we could get rid of the trachea in the way here, but I don't know why it's green, but probably that's, if you do dissections before, most muscles, they look gray and green. So just showing the contrast between the anterior versus the posterior. Very similar looking structures. They both help give us a healthy lordosis. It can cause a twisting if one's working more than the other. So we see a twist in the neck, just like we're seeing a twist in the pelvis. So when I'm teaching people to stand, I'm talking about, okay, drive your collarbones back, drive the front of your rib cage back, drive your pubic bones back. We need all these 3 points back so we can get the center of gravity, and then we can get the feet involved to drive upwards to resist gravity. Which usually put a weight in somebody's hands, they like a heavy enough weight. That's why I teach kettlebells. Heavy enough weight, this kind of automatically happens. That's why weight strength training is good. You really don't have to think about too much. It just kind of naturally will happen. People could fight that, but in general, sometimes it just automatically starts correcting the problem. There's that rounding in the back that we'll see with the deadlift. That's what we want. We're lengthening, we're locking, we're rounding. So that's all I have for you today. I know that was a lot. It was out there a little bit. But I hope you liked it. If you have questions or you want deeper dives on certain topics, let me know. But this awareness when you're moving will help. I know we didn't really talk about the fix too much. If you watch some of my lives that I've done recently, we talk a lot about what to do and how to be aware of it, how to try to fix this torsion. And we'll continue doing that. All right, take care.